I was watching a documentary earlier on Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. There's a lot of issues around this. Of course, Timothy McVeigh is infamous as the um, the bomber behind America's worst domestic terrorist attack, and the worst terrorist attack on American soil until 9/11. 168 people killed in Oklahoma City, the Alfred P. Murrah building, April 19th, 1995. This was the second anniversary of the Waco siege in Texas, and those two events are inextricably linked. There was another guy, I believe his name was Mike Nichols, who was implicated along with Timothy McVeigh. But what concerns me about looking at that case is that the sort of mentality and the sort of thinking that McVeigh had is very far from gone. There are still a lot of Timothy McVeighs out there, or potential Timothy McVeighs, as I observe it. I'm thinking of that rally in Virginia recently, the militia group that was rallying for the Second Amendment rights. And I've just seen an exchange featured on CNN. Joe Biden was at a car plant in Michigan, and he was confronted by a worker there who claimed that he was coming out to take away your firearms. Um, Firstly, a few things about Oklahoma City and the context of that. There are some out there who, whilst stopping short of outright condoning what happened, and I know for Oklahomans that was a really, really raw thing. You know, Oklahoma City is a sizable city, but it's not a massive city. So for something like that to happen, really, right in the middle of the United States, like literally geographically the middle of the United States, um, must have been absolutely. I was only 9 at the time, but it must have really had an impact, even in a country that has a history of violence. That really must have had an impact on the public psyche. And what's chilling about McVeigh is his utter lack of remorse. He dismissed the children that he killed as collateral damage. I mean, this man was evil. You know, to callously slaughter 168 men, women, and children, and to dismiss the children as collateral damage, claiming that the federal government laid down the law, laid down the rules of combat. It's scary that you have this prevailing mentality that there are American citizens who believe that their government is out to get them and that the only way to fight back is by forming these militias. Um, and like I say, I think they have the same mentality as Timothy McVeigh. They're convinced that the Democrats want to take all the firearms, leaving aside the fact it would be physically impossible. There's so many guns in America, even if that was the Democratic plan, and I don't believe it is, but even if it was, it would be physically impossible in a country we're awash with guns. But anyway, so the Waco siege, the sort of prevailing idea is this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back that tipped McVeigh over the edge. Um, After his service in the First Gulf War, he come back. He was bitter. His grandfather died, I believe. That was who he was close to, and who had this mutual interest in guns. But McVeigh, like a lot of Second Amendment people, were furious about Waco because they saw that as an assault by the federal government on American citizens. They conveniently forget the fact that David Koresh was a perverted cult leader who was likely raping children, who literally said that he was entitled to have sex with any woman in the compound. I mean, to just mitigate that fact, to mitigate the context of what was going on there, and it's true, we'll probably never know exactly who opened fire first at Waco. I'm not going to say that the federal government comes out entirely clean. I think that would be very naive. You know, I know the American corridors of power. There's corruption. There is some incredibly morally dubious things that they have done. The CIA has a lot of blood on its hands. I don't deny that for a second. But that doesn't mean that there isn't dangerous other actors out there, cult leaders like David Koresh. Um, and you know what I have a problem with is how it's framed as sure the children were innocent, but Koresh wasn't. And Ruby Ridge standoff again. If the guy involved in that had, he's portrayed as a law-abiding citizen, well, he wasn't. He was a felon who was committing infractions on appearing. Well, he wasn't appearing before court. This was a guy who was resisting arrest. He wasn't. He was not a good guy with a gun, and it is utterly tragic that his wife and daughter were killed. It's always tragic when innocent people die, but I think that the Second Amendment types constantly frame themselves as innocent victims, and I don't think it's that simple. I mean, the Second Amendment, right? What about the First Amendment? What about First Amendment rights? When I see these armed militias, when I see these guys, in their leather jackets and sometimes with Confederate flags, um, sometimes aligned with white nationalist groups, not always, but more often than not, when when they're heavily armed, when they literally are coming down the main street with weapons that are made for war, what is the purpose of that? Is the purpose to simply demonstrate their right to bear arms, or is it more likely to intimidate opponents? I think the latter is far more likely. So they're yelling about their Second Amendment rights. They want to physically intimidate opponents from having their First Amendment rights, i.e., to free expression. This exchange the guy had with Joe Biden to me is an example of the sort of extreme paranoia that the Second Amendment crowd have. Now, it is true there's a few Democrats who have advocated perhaps gun buybacks and stuff like that. I don't think that's practical, but I really don't think a politician as seasoned as Joe Biden, whatever you think of him, Biden knows that there'll never be a situation where you can simply take away guns from all Americans. And when he said to this guy that he got quite angry because he said that the man was distorting his words. So that's, they had an exchange. And I would say that is pretty much what's happened because you get these Second Amendment people who believe every word the NRA tells them. And they genuinely believe that any mention of gun control is about disarming citizens. I mean, I find I've followed this thing for years as an outsider. They don't care about children being shot in schools. They clearly don't care about that. They don't care about how the United States compares to other countries. So the phony example of only dictatorships take away guns is a lie because you have multi-party democracies like the United Kingdom, Japan, Australia have very tough gun laws and very, very low gun homicide rates. It's a fact. It's just a fact. They can just disregard that. Okay, even if we look at the American context, look at the Virginia Beach shooting. One of the main claims of the gun lobby is these massacres only occur in gun-free zones. Well, where that massacre occurred wasn't a gun-free zone. And this idea that, oh, if you arm citizens, then these massacres won't happen. There have been a small handful of examples of armed citizens taking out a gunman. Few examples. Killeen, Texas, 1991 was one example, apparently, but that wasn't before a massacre had already happened. I believe that some of the civilians there, some of the people involved, they shot the gunman, which may have prevented more deaths. But the bottom line is this: if more guns made a society safe, then the United States would be one of the safest countries in the world. It's not. But anyway, what really concerns me as an observer is that the sort of mentality that Timothy McVeigh had, very often based on conspiracy theories rather than actual facts. I mean, Biden got quite angry when the guy was saying, "Oh, you want to take away our guns." I've never seen Biden say anything of the sort. He has advocated strong gun control. He has advocated that this American nightmare needs to end, of massacre after massacre after massacre. I've never seen him say, we're going to take away the guns of law-abiding gun owners. So if someone legally has a gun, you see, the issue comes down to better regulation, but also simple question. Why does a civilian need a military level weapon? Why does a civilian need so many rounds of ammo? You know, if someone isn't a licensed hunter, they don't have a gun to protect themselves and their family. In other words, they just want a gun. I mean, I cannot comprehend the mentality of bringing a loaded firearm, and I believe this is the situation in some states. In Texas, for example, you can legally bring a loaded firearm into a public place. To me, that is utterly insane. I mean, the logic is, oh, well, a good guy with a gun will stop the massacre. But how the hell is Joe or Jill Average supposed to know who is the good guy with a gun? You know, if I see someone with open carry, how am I supposed to know that's a good guy with a gun, like a law-abiding, responsible citizen, or a potential spray shooter? There is no way to know. That's why it's so dangerous. And that doesn't even take into account accidents that can happen. Someone who hasn't cocked a gun properly. You know, there's been many examples of people getting accidentally shot if someone hasn't, you know, the guns went off in their belts or whatever because they haven't stocked it properly. I just think that it's I don't say anything radically changing, but that assault weapons ban that the Clinton administration brought in 1994, it had effect. Because if you look at the number of mass shootings in the 1990s, Columbine, of course, is the famous one, but overall there were a lot fewer than there has been in the last 20 years, i.e., under Republican administrations. Yeah, they occurred under the Obama administration as well, but I think that's in large part to the Republicans constantly putting up barriers to common sense legislation about, for example, bumper um, stocks, as in the Las Vegas massacre. I just don't understand the mentality. But I think some of these militias are bloody dangerous. I think they are potential domestic terrorists. And clearly their intention is to intimidate. These guys, and it's mostly men, some women as well, they're not saying, oh, we're simply demonstrating our right to bear arms. They're saying, we want you to be intimidated. There was even a congressman or representative, forget which state, but he made a direct threat to Biden and Buttigieg, come and take it. That very much reminds me, he actually took the weapon off its wall, was holding it. It was a veiled threat. That reminds me very much of the crosshairs that Sarah Palin put out against Congresswoman Gifford and others. As far as I'm concerned, politicians who do this, they have blood on their hands because they are stoking the flames. That goes well beyond simply saying I support the Second Amendment. That is actually advocating violence. They're not literally saying go out and kill my opponent, but they're basically distorting the position of their opponents in order to stoke up crazies against them. It's absolutely despicable. Anyway, that's my take. I don't think that I think sadly there may be another potential at some point for another sort of large scale domestic terrorist attack because of the distortion that is out there, because of the outright fake news, because of the scaremongering of people like Donald Trump, actually, and others, that the Democrats are going to grab your guns. I haven't seen any evidence of a single example of law abiding gun owners. That Ruby Ridge standoff, the point there was the guy, it's like I said, it's awful that his wife and child died. There was a shootout, but he was not a law abiding citizen. He failed to make a court appearance. This was not, you know, a responsible family man. This was a man who was on the wrong side of the law. So you need to look at that in context as well, because there's so many outright lies from the gun lobby, and they, you know, it's Project Fear. They want to scare people into believing that, oh, well, the Democrats are going to take away your gun, so then violent criminals will come into your house and they'll kill and rape you. There was a case in California, actually. the Golden Coast rapist, I believe that was the epithet of this serial killer. And apparently at a town hall meeting, one guy stood up and said he couldn't believe the modus operandi. Basically, this guy was breaking into homes, he was raping women and killing their husbands. It was pretty awful. Um, but one guy stood up at a town hall meeting and said, "No, no true American man would allow that to happen if they have firearms." Well, he was a gun owner. He turned out to be the next victim. So this sort of conclusion that, oh well, if we have guns, we'll be totally safe, ignores the fact that when you have a spree shooting, that doesn't protect gun owners. Okay, if you're a really good shot, I guess you could maybe take the gunman out, you know, but not before a massacre's already happened. And why does it happen? Because it's far too easy to get a gun in America. That's why. Because people with mental health problems, people who may not have a criminal record, but they clearly aren't in a situation to have guns, they can still get them. That needs to change.